Meet 32-year-old Lorraine Cox. She's heading toward her father's house. It's 2 in the morning, and for the last few minutes, Lorraine has been followed by a man in a black hoodie. His name is Azam Mangori, a 22-year-old asylum seeker from Iraq. Moments later, he closes in and wraps an arm around her shoulder. He's trying to persuade her to come home with him. The woman is clearly on edge, yet for some unknown reason, she doesn't scream or call for help. And tragically, this is the last time Lorraine would ever be seen alive. The following morning, the same man is spotted leaving his apartment building with no sign of Lorraine anywhere. He is, however, carrying a large blue backpack, and this is the first of many trips he will make to sanitize the crime scene back inside his apartment. For 2 days after she vanished, Lorraine's phone was still powered on. Her family and friends, expecting to hear from her after she'd been out, began to receive text messages, but the communication felt wrong. The replies were brief, impersonal, and nothing like Lorraine's usual way of speaking. When they tried to call her, the calls would simply ring out, unanswered. Moments later, a text would come through, offering an excuse for not picking up the phone. This pattern was an immediate red flag. Lorraine was famous for being in constant contact with the people she loved. The refusal to take a direct phone call was a major warning sign, as her friends and family pressed her over text, asking where she was and whether she was safe. The answers became increasingly evasive, and then a new piece of digital evidence appeared. Lorraine's Facebook profile was updated. Her location was changed to Plymouth, a city more than 40 miles away. A message was sent to her closest connections, claiming she had decided to move there on a whim. This announcement cemented the dread that was growing among her loved ones. It was completely illogical. Lorraine had only just moved back to Exeter, a place she chose specifically to be closer to her friends and family after a very difficult time away. She never would have left again so suddenly without telling anyone face to face, and she certainly wouldn't have announced it so coldly, with a social media update. Her family was now convinced that the person sending these messages was not Lorraine. The suspicious digital silence and the bizarre Facebook update were all the proof they needed. Lorraine's father, desperate for answers, went to her apartment on September 3rd to check on her in person. He had to see for himself if she was really gone. When he arrived, the flat was empty. There was no trace of Lorraine, no note, and no sign that she had packed for a sudden move to Plymouth. Everything seemed to be mostly in its place until he found the one object that turned his profound suspicion into horrifying certainty. In her apartment, her father located all of her medication. Lorraine Cox was a type 1 diabetic. She was dependent on daily insulin to survive. This discovery was the most critical piece of evidence. A person can forget their keys or phone, but a type 1 diabetic does not forget their life-sustaining medication. This fact was irrefutable. She had not left of her own free will. This physical evidence confirmed his worst fears. Any hope that this was just a misunderstanding was completely gone. Convinced that his daughter was in grave danger and that foul play was involved, Lorraine's father went directly to the police on September 3rd, 2020. He officially filed a missing person report for Lorraine Cox. The investigation was now active. The top priority was to establish a concrete timeline. Investigators began by questioning the friends Lorraine was with on the night of August 31st, who corroborated the final known details of her evening. They confirmed Lorraine had been at a pub with them, but they got separated shortly before closing, around 1 a.m., at which point she turned down a cab. She insisted on walking the short distance to her father's place. With this established timeline and intended route, the investigation had a starting point. Detectives immediately pivoted to the most critical asset in any modern urban investigation: the city's vast network of CCTV camera. They initiated the painstaking task of retrieving hours of footage from every public and private camera positioned along her probable route home. It wasn't long before they got a hit. On footage captured just after 2 in the morning, they spotted Lorraine strolling down Exeter High Street. She was by herself, and, judging by her gait, seemed at ease. But as detectives tracked her progress from one camera's lens to the next, a second individual emerged into view, a man in a dark hoodie, also walking alone, just a short distance behind her. It became alarmingly clear that he was tailing her. The police watched intently as this man, later identified as Azam Mangori, shadowed Lorraine for more than a mile. Investigators then zeroed in on the critical moment of contact, when he closed the distance between them. Lorraine, seemingly oblivious, continued her casual pace. Mangori moved in closer, and then, at a certain point, Lorraine turned and acknowledged him. A brief exchange occurred, after which Lorraine crossed the street. Mangori followed suit. The last piece of footage that captured the two of them showed them walking in close proximity. Mangori then placed his arm around Lorraine's shoulder, and they appeared to be heading back in the direction they had just come from. Their last visual was of them turning down a side street. Beyond that point, the digital trail vanished. No other camera picked up an image of Lorraine Cox. Her visual footprint was gone. But the trail of the man she was with was another story. All investigative resources were now laser-focused on identifying this person of interest. Knowing their last known location, detectives began to work backward, meticulously retracing the man's movements prior to his approach, tracking him through the very same camera network. The footage revealed the man hadn't been aimlessly wandering the high street for any length of time. He was captured on camera emerging from a specific doorway, the residential entrance to an apartment, situated directly above a kebab shop just off the high street. The crucial detail was the timestamp, which showed he exited the building only after Lorraine had already walked past it. This confirmed that he had likely spotted her from inside his residence or right outside the door and then made a conscious decision to follow her. With a location now secured, officers were immediately dispatched to the address. Arriving at the residence in question, they were greeted by a 22-year-old male who gave his name to the officers as Christopher Myers. When questioned about the woman in the CCTV footage, he flatly denied any involvement. He insisted he'd never seen Lorraine Cox and knew nothing about her or where she might be, but the officers were holding an ace: irrefutable digital evidence. They presented him with the CCTV footage, which clearly showed him exiting his building and pursuing Lorraine and ultimately walking off with his arm around her. Confronted with this undeniable proof, his story completely fell apart. Now, certain he was the last person to see Lorraine alive, police arrested the man calling himself Christopher Myers on suspicion of kidnapping. However, the kidnapping charge was just a placeholder. Immediately after the arrest, police launched an intensive forensic sweep of the area surrounding the kebab shop, which included the alley directly behind the building where the suspect had first appeared. The search of the alleyway soon yielded a series of grim discoveries inside the dumpsters and bins. Investigators uncovered several bags, and within them, the dismembered remains of a human body, including arms and legs. A subsequent forensic analysis would later confirm that these remains were those of Lorraine Cox. What began as a missing persons case had now officially escalated into a homicide investigation. The alleyway continued to give up more evidence. Police recovered Lorraine's rucksack, the very same one she was seen wearing in the CCTV footage. They also discovered her clothing and mobile phone, all disposed of in the immediate vicinity. The search perimeter was then widened. A search of the suspect's apartment turned up Lorraine's bank card and her driver's license. A systematic inspection of the building's plumbing led to yet another discovery: Lorraine's SIM card, which was retrieved from a drain inside the property. The sheer volume of physical evidence was overwhelming, creating a direct link between the suspect and Lorraine's disappearance and subsequent death. It was now abundantly clear that the man calling himself Christopher Myers had not been truthful. Faced with the mountain of evidence discovered in and around his residence, the suspect's narrative began to crumble, beginning with his very identity. He was not Christopher Myers. He confessed to police that his real name was Azam Mangori, a 22-year-old immigrant from Iraq. He explained that he had sought refuge in the United Kingdom, asserting that his identity as a gay man was a capital offense in his home country. His application for asylum, however, had been denied back in 2018, after which he entered the UK illegally, concealed in the back of a truck. Now, with his true identity exposed, Mangori presented an entirely new version of events. He acknowledged meeting Lorraine on the main street, claiming they had struck up a casual conversation and that he had invited her back to his apartment, promising more alcohol and illicit substances. According to Mangori's account, Lorraine readily accepted the invitation. He then offered a startling new detail, claiming that before they even arrived at his apartment, he and Lorraine engaged in a consensual encounter in an alleyway. As proof, he provided police with a video of the act, which he claimed to have recorded on his phone. He alleged that he made the recording to protect himself from any potential future accusations. Following this encounter, he stated, the two of them proceeded to his apartment, where they continued to drink, listen to music, and were intimate on several more occasions. The narrative Mangori was weaving was one of a consensual night that ended in a tragic, unforeseen accident. Azam Mangori's story picked up from the moment they were inside his apartment. He alleged that at some point in the evening, Lorraine produced a dark substance wrapped in foil, and the two of them began to smoke it. He insisted to police that he didn't know what the substance was, only that it immediately made him feel dizzy and nauseous. He then stated that he went to lie down on his bed and lost consciousness. According to his new statement, he awoke sometime later. He claimed he found Lorraine unconscious on the floor and, upon checking on her, discovered she was no longer breathing. This, he alleged, threw him into a state of pure panic. Mangori told investigators he attempted to perform CPR but was suddenly overcome by a terrifying hallucination. He claimed he began to see spiders crawling out of her mouth. Overwhelmed by this grotesque vision, he claimed he grabbed a t-shirt, later identified as Lorraine's, and shoved it into her mouth, in a desperate attempt to stop the spiders. After this, Mangori stated he blacked out again, insisting that the days that followed were a confusing haze, where the line between reality and illusion had completely blurred. He told police he was in a profoundly altered mental state, clinging desperately to the narrative that Lorraine would miraculously awaken. He even applied this defense to the dismemberment itself. Mangori alleged that his mind had detached from the horrific act. He claimed that as he was dismembering Lorraine's body, he was oblivious to his own actions, believing he was simply chopping up wet tobacco. This was the outlandish story he presented to the detectives, an accidental death fueled by drugs, followed by a psychotic, hallucinatory breakdown. Azam Mangori's tale of a drug-fueled mishap and a hallucinatory panic was bizarre, but it was also a testable alibi. Detectives immediately began to cross-reference his claims against the physical and digital evidence, and his entire account quickly began to disintegrate. First up, the toxicology report. Mangori claimed that he and Lorraine had smoked an unidentified black substance that caused him to lose consciousness. The forensic toxicology analysis, however, performed on Lorraine's body, found no trace of any such drugs within her system. This directly refuted his central claim of an accidental overdose and his subsequent drug-addled haze. Second, there was the matter of his supposed panic. Mangori portrayed himself as being paralyzed by fear and lost in a confused, delusional state. But the surveillance footage from the days following Lorraine's death revealed a man who was methodical, calm, and incredibly calculated. He was captured on camera on numerous occasions, appearing composed as he exited his building carrying heavy bags. He was observed traveling across town with a large blue backpack to dispose of Lorraine's remains. This calculated behavior was further corroborated by his digital activity just hours after Lorraine's death, while her body was still inside his apartment. Mangori was sending videos to his friends. The clips showed him casually listening to music and smoking a hookah pipe only a few feet from where Lorraine lay deceased. Furthermore, store surveillance cameras captured him purchasing supplies, including trash bags, tape, suitcase, and an air purifier. These were not the actions of a man consumed by panic. They were the actions of a man systematically sanitizing a crime scene. The final and most incriminating evidence was pulled from Azam Mangori's own phone. His insistence that he was in a disoriented, hallucinatory state while dismembering the body, convinced he was merely chopping wet tobacco, was completely obliterated by his own search history. Digital forensic investigators examining his device found that in the days prior to the murder, before he had ever even met Lorraine Cox, Mangori had been actively researching videos of human amputation. He had also specifically looked up instructions on how to dig a grave by hand. This evidence screamed premeditation. His actions were not a panicked response to an accidental death. He had been actively planning for a body disposal before he even had a victim in his sights. This digital footprint was supported by the physical forensic evidence the court would later examine, which indicated that Lorraine's limbs had been severed cleanly at the joints. This was not the work of a panicked, hallucinating man. It was precise and methodical. Moreover, Mangori had taken the calculated step of removing a tattoo from Lorraine's back, a clear and deliberate attempt to complicate the identification of her remains. Mangori, however, persisted with his version of events, pleading not guilty to murder but confessing to the illegal disposal of the body. But the prosecution, armed with the toxicology report, the calm surveillance footage, and the bone-chilling internet search history, was poised to present a very different and far more disturbing narrative to the jury. During the trial at Exeter Crown Court, Azam Mangori continued to deny the murder charge. He held firm to his story, confessing only to the unlawful concealment of Lorraine's remains. In contrast, the prosecution laid out a chilling and systematic account for the jury, painting Mangori as a cold-blooded and deliberate perpetrator, one who had painstakingly orchestrated such an offense. The state's attorneys detailed how Mangori departed from his apartment on the evening of August 31st, actively seeking a target. His eyes fell upon Lorraine, who was clearly impaired and isolated from her friends, making her the perfect mark. They contended that Mangori's actual motive wasn't a physical liaison, but the realization of his depraved fantasies, a claim supported by his web history of searching for media depicting dismemberment. The prosecution's case held that Mangori enticed Lorraine back to his residence, where he ultimately took her life, likely by asphyxiation, using her own t-shirt, the very same item he alleged was used to deal with spiders. He then, with chilling detachment, systematically disarticulated her remains over a week's time, methodically planning their concealment by placing them in bags and receptacles throughout the city. In the end, the jury returned a guilty verdict for the murder of Lorraine Cox against Azam Mangori. At the sentencing hearing, the presiding judge denounced Mangori's conduct. He characterized the man as a cold, calculating predator who had targeted a bright, vivacious, and brilliant young woman with her entire future before her. Azam Mangori received a sentence of life imprisonment, with the stipulation that he serve a minimum of 20 years before any possibility of parole.